Hello, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of IUCN's World Commission on Environmental Law's Early Career Specialist Groups, this year's final Early Career Talk. And I am Aishwarya. I'm the co-lead for the mentorship program of IUCN WCL mentorship program. And today we have two amazing, wonderful women who is spearheading transformational movement with youth at the heart. Uh, so we have Srishti Singh with us, who's a seasoned climate professional with more than 12 years of experience, and she has worked in several roles and currently working as the climate change and environment sustainability lead at Generation Unlimited UA at UNICEF India. And we have Hemavathi Shekar, again, a person who has worked in various roles, had experimented in a lot of roles, and who is the founder of Enact Earth Foundation and also the former Global South focal point at YOUNGO UNFCCC. Now she is also a PhD scholar in Terry School of Advanced Studies. I welcome both of you, and I know the introduction which I gave about both of you did not would not even have touched the tip of the iceberg. So I would just leave you people to introduce yourself and share with us and take us through your journey and what role you currently play in your jobs or in your organizations. Let's start with Srishti. To you,
Thanks so much,
Srishti.
Ishwarya. Thanks so much, Ishwarya, for having me and the IUSCN team. I'm Srishti, and I have been working in the climate change space, as you heard, close to about 12 years now. Currently, I lead the climate change and environmental sustainability at the youth engagement section of UNICEF India, which is globally called as Generation Unlimited, but in India, it's called a little in a more simpler way in the local language as Yuva, which means youth. As part of my role at UNICEF India, I'm spearheading a global initiative, an India chapter of the global initiative, which is called as the Green Rising India, where UNICEF, the Generation Unlimited, and our partners have come together to see how young people can build climate resilience across different nations. It's going in about 80 plus countries. India is, of course, the front runner as the Generation Unlimited India in itself. So Green Rising is also a front runner when we see the Green Rising performance across the globe. Under Green Rising, we have a couple of priorities, which is first is my favorite, which is promoting the grassroots champions and how they can be mainstreamed across different levels, how their voices can be amplified in the policy spaces, how can their journeys be facilitated from local to global level. That's one thing. Second is powering green skills and jobs. There's a lot of discussion happening around green skills and jobs, but what does it mean for India? Where does the Indian young workforce can come in? So that's the second priority. And the third priority is having more focused efforts, multi-stakeholder efforts for climate and young people. So the Generation Unlimited is like in India, it's the public-private youth partnership platform. Yuva works as a platform for bringing these public-private youth partnerships together, and Green Rising is trying to focus on those partnerships, but of course, around the thematic area of climate. So that's what we have initiated as part of my role. It's just 1.5 year of me joining Yuva and UNICEF, but it's the climate work is fairly new to Yuva and also UNICEF's new mandate of working with young people and climate change. So we are just trying to have more and more understanding of the space and also trying to create more impact. Over to Hema.
Thank you, Srishti. Hema, your journey, and you know, we are so excited to hear about it.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. And like you aptly said, I've played a lot of experimental roles. So that probably because so that more people can learn from my mistakes. Um, but I think I started off simply as somebody who I'm a lawyer by training, and I used to be on the field, go to courts representing these communities and stuff. But at that point of time, the narrative or the kind of work I wanted to do, I wasn't sure it. I was just, 23 years old, and, going, you're just put out in the field telling that the government is such a villain and everybody's suffering because of the government, and then you go to the judges and having to deal with other lawyers about all the gross injustice, because court is one place where you truly get to see the kind of suffering people are going through, simply because everybody's coming to that one place to seek justice, right? I think that's where my journey kind of started, because I had to, like, I was on the field for like almost 3 months trying to, understand what the communities are experiencing, and obviously then translate to what it means legally and how can we fight on their behalf itself. But what was life changing for me is that these people, their resilience despite all that they're going through the whole time, and I felt helpless. Like, I was, my first interview, simply because I was somebody who spoke the same language as the person I was talking to, she felt comfortable enough, but she shared her whole life story in 3 hours of my first interview, although it was zero usefulness in terms of my legal work that I had to do. But I think it impacted me in terms of the kind of confidence and motivation I needed to be working with these people. And it was also a matter of question, when you speak about law and justice and policy and everything else, am I like the kind of privilege I have to be fighting on somebody else's behalf, and it's not necessarily my fight, right? I'm not the one struggling to survive or have a house or get food on the plate, but I'm privileged enough to be able to fight on somebody's behalf, and that's what lawyers do in India when it comes to public interest litigation. uh, so I think that's where my journey started. And eventually I did take a pause. I became a professor and went into being, teaching something so technical and far away from environment, corporate laws, income tax, and a lot of other things. But I think my heart always went back to, I think, although there was no money, there was like job satisfaction in trying to help people. Because even if you get like a smallest of an order, you have no idea how these people, like, they're so grateful, they're so thankful, like you literally saved their lives. And I probably did nothing, absolutely nothing. It was just a piece of paper that I submitted to the court. But I saw the value in how you can contribute back to the society with the knowledge I had. I might not necessarily have money, because most of the times philanthropy and the kind of impact work always speaks to, people having money and the fact that they can have impact. But I also experienced it, that, I'm capable of having an impact through my work, when all I had to do is just help them have the basic rights that they're entitled to as human beings. And that's mattered to them so much. They didn't ask for like crores of money or lakhs of money, but all they wanted is that their basic rights are protected. And I think there's this weird sense of satisfaction. I would do anything. I mean, zero money, and I'd still do that work. So while yeah, so I decided I didn't want to continue teaching, although my passion for teaching stays. I continue to do it part time. I went back, and I started my own NGO wanting to do groundwork. But I was very conscious for a long time, because I also started my PhD at the same time, that I didn't want to replicate the kind of work that everybody else is doing. The moment you get into climate space, everybody wants to, sit down and teach everybody about climate change itself, like educate them. And that's not like, go, what do you want to teach farmers or the impacted communities about climate change? They're experiencing it. There's no need for education per se. So I think I wanted to build and shift a narrative. So right now at least as I'm building Enact, we're trying to focus on three things. One thing is obviously youth empowerment, which means intergenerational equity. Another is gender justice. And one thing that is majorly missing in the Indian context is something called participatory justice. You can have an end goal that is just, but if you're the process that you adopt to reach that end goal is unjust, it's not something that we consider. Like, are people involved in decision making processes? Are people given the right kind of information to make better decisions, and stuff? So we are going to be starting a bunch of projects very soon. One definitely on loss and damage, a conversation that is absolutely absent in India. People are still dying because of climate change, but nobody seems to care enough about it as much as they care about mitigation or adaptation. So that's something Enact's going to be focusing on soon. But that's my journey until now.
You're on mute, Ishwarya.
Thank you. That's amazing, and it takes a lot of courage, to experiment. And both of you have done it a lot. And could you please share us some insights about your experiment in relation to the youth engagement and some of your precious memories uh, in this journey with youth? Again, maybe
So,
Srishti and then Hema. Yeah.
yes, yes, I'm just taking turns. I know Hema has just finished. So, in terms of youth engagement, empowerment, I think in the last 5 years, where I have focusedly working on, involvement of young people, engagement of young people, we can have more young people in decision making spaces or in say dialogues where climate is being discussed. I am sort of like of a person who pauses and reflects a lot on where this whole thing is going, where I am still working on my objective. So I think a couple of years back, or maybe 1.5 year back, I was hit by this whole thing about, okay, I felt that we have talked a lot on empowerment, engagement of young people. But what do the young people want? Like, we feel that they should be empowered. These youth should be engaged more and all of that. But I think we have grown past that level where the engagement and empowerment could be more than it could serve the whole thing which we are focusing, or we have set a goal on young people's contribution to climate space. I feel they need a spec. This has come also from my experience with different programs which I had been involved in, where young people were the major, stakeholder, where we were working with young people to say on plastic pollution with UNEP on plastic tide turners program, and there were other programs where we were running campaigns for them. I had in my previous years organized local conference of youth, and while we were having these kind of impact reports also coming in, I also wanted to understand young people's needs. And now after that, while I was still working with young people, I kept collating those thoughts, and I saw that actually now young people need more skills, and skills not only on the technical side of it or how to innovate or you know but very basic life skills. Like, they wanted to communicate better, they wanted to write better social media posts, because nowadays visibility is getting a lot of traction, and they get more support, and they can be featured everywhere, and their stories could be published. So they needed those kind of basic skills to understand how all of this works. So there have been grassroots leaders where I have written posts for them because they wanted to post but they didn't know how to do it. So it's a very basic skill right now. It's like we do it every day, but they didn't know how to do it. So I saw there was a huge gap in terms of having these basic skills, not understanding Excel, how they can develop budgets. They had there was a young leader who had gotten say 1.5 lakh or something in Indian rupees, and she was supposed to spend, like, she was supposed to give a breakup of that budget, how she's gonna spend it, and she didn't know how to do it, although she had already raised through her networks. So those kind of skills we were talking about. And then of course a lot of some financial or economic opportunities, either through a job opportunity or career guidance, or also in terms of fundraising for their own small initiatives, projects. They didn't know where to go, how to fundraise, how to find jobs, how to find jobs in their local area where they don't have to migrate. So these were all the skills which I felt the young people were lacking, and we need to move away, as Hema also mentioned, we need to move away from education to skill development, especially when we are talking about young people. So after a lot of brainstorming while I was developing this national strategy for UNICEF India last year, I came in with this idea on, and now we have launched it. We are already almost done with the pilot also. It's called the National Youth Climate Consortium, where we are exactly trying to touch upon two, three core issues, which of course we have ideated, we have co-created it with the Bring Back Green Foundation, and of course, me as Yuva team and other people have come together, and we are really trying to build those specific skills right from designing posters from on Canva to how they can pitch, on how they can develop easy budgets. And while we are doing that, the main idea is also to give some sort of financial support in the hands of those young leaders and see how they can grow in their own local areas through more through stakeholder partnerships, through advocating for their projects, for themselves, for the other young people in the community, and also trying to facilitate their journeys from local to national to global levels. So trying to make use of all the experience I have gained and looked at what kind of needs young people have at this point of time. While they are leading, they are champions of sustainability, they are like volunteering so much, but I feel there is a huge gap when it comes to these kind of understandings for the young people, where this finance is a huge gap. And that's what we are trying to fill in through providing some resource support and building a lot of their skills so that they can advocate for themselves. So, like in summary, the National Youth Climate Consortium is all about youth-led climate advocacy, but giving them some resource support to kick off their own projects, lot of skills so that and mentorship so that they can continue with their journeys, and also unlocking their potential at different levels so that they can continue to build more leaders with themselves. So yeah, that's what I would like to stop.
Oh, very nice. I think you took few minutes to explain like how you have come up with a strategy with the help of BBG, and I'm very happy that a few of them also attended COP and shared their experiences and the work that they do there, which is really amazing. So, Hema, how about you share this your experiences with youth in youth engagement and why it is close to you?
Um, okay, maybe I'll start off with why I felt youth engagement was important. Because this is me, like I said, my first job when I was 23 years old was to represent communities at the Karnataka High Court, right? But then this also meant I had to meet like the district collector and all sorts of officials for, random data and, meeting and everything else. And this is something like not so big a deal, but then it was just about how as a young person you're treated in the country. I went in, I never told them I'm a lawyer. I'm like, registered at the Karnataka State Bar Council, but I never went. I just went in saying that I'm here on behalf of this NGO. I'm doing this project. Can you please help me with? And the person wouldn't even allow me to like sit and have a conversation with him, because another thing is this huge impression that all NGO people are activists, blah blah blah, and everything. So when you don't disclose your identity and when you just go in as a young person, there's always this bias against young people that comes in with, especially people in power and especially government officials in the country. But the same thing, and I had to go to my colleague who's like 45 years old, and he came in and I went behind him, but then he was treated, sir, please come sit down, gave him a glass of juice and a lot of other things. And at that point of time, it mattered to me because both of us are saying the exact same thing. But just because maybe I was a girl, a young person, whatever it is, somebody failed to listen to what I had to say, despite having credibility with the work I'm doing. The guy who came in, he's somebody, an admin person working with the NGO, has no idea about what is really happening. He's just supporting us. but somebody with content, with the knowledge of what is happening, wasn't given a chance. Is it because I was a young person? I mean, that is what it felt like. And I think that experience always stays with me, on how young people are continually discredited despite having the knowledge. The lack of experience always is like a easy way for people to say, I don't want to engage with young people because they have any experience. So I think that experience stayed with me. And when I started working in the climate space, like actively, it was only like 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, when I started working for something called the Conference of Youth in Scotland. And then that opened up my understanding of, oh, there are people who treat young people nicely and they actually are listened to and people are given opportunities and stuff. But then I think it was a huge learning process in that shift, because for somebody who engaged with like a district collector in a village administrative office, as opposed to going to an international level where you have foreign governments bringing in young people as negotiators to a UN conference and stuff. That was like a huge difference thing for me. And this was in 2021 COP26 Glasgow. um, but I did realize a lot of things when it came to young people sharing more and more stories with me about their experience in their own country. And a lot of countries in the global south are very similar that way, be it Africa or Latin America, on how young people are treated. Maybe it has to do with our cultures, because it's like we revere our adults. Everything adults say is like, you know just like something God says, and everybody should just blindly listen to it, and stuff. But how do you start questioning the status quo of something that is ingrained into the society itself? So obviously that is something that is the baseline of all the work I do. And when I did get a chance to become the focal point, we actively, I mean, again, I am very conscious about the kind of privilege I've had, because we work with the headquarters of all UN agencies, be it UNICEF, UNDP, UNFPA, and all. And I take pride in the fact that we were able to empower young girls to host a local conference of youth online in Afghanistan, or the first Elkoi in Syria, which is a conflict afflicted region. So people need support, like just like Srishti mentioned, there are a lot of people willing to do such amazing things. All they need is like support. And all I had to do in my position is go back to the HQ and say, if you have somebody in the region or a country office, can they support this person in implementing this? And that was enough. That is also youth empowerment in some way or the other. I don't have to sit down and take a class about what is climate change. And that is a very narrow minded view of what youth empowerment becomes, right? So how we approach and to what is youth empowerment. And again, during my mandate, we had a bunch of researchers work on something called the youth stocktake, who had come up with a amazing report about how young people have been engaging in UNFCCC negotiations and stuff. But what we fail to understand most of the time is there's a difference between youth engagement and meaningful youth engagement. And that meaningful, a lot of people don't even know how to engage with young people. It's like, you have this meme, I don't know if you've seen this on Instagram, where you have this huge age gap between the elder sibling and the younger sibling. And you have like a 3-year-old, and the elder sibling goes like, do you want beer? I don't know what else to ask to the kid. And this is what the adults are feeling right now, because they really don't know what to ask us or how to engage with us. And because of the generation and how society is exponentially growing with a lot of things, adults are left behind, and then unable to catch up with the young people who are willing to do action. And sometimes adults end up becoming barriers to whatever young people want to do. So I think it's, for me, youth empowerment this way is about creating those spaces where young people can be present in the first place. There are a lot of spaces which are devoid of young people itself. And the thing is, we are here dealing with this crisis because we have been continuing the status quo, right? that this means we need to change. If you're going to be like, let's listen to adults and continue what they have to say, and if we don't change our mindset and be more creative in changing what has been happening already, I don't think we're going to make progress. And that is why young people are needed. And I mean, just to even build on the kind of work Srishti did, we did different kind of work. I'm part of the Loss and Damage Youth Grant Making Council. But and the thing is, as somebody who's like global south, and as a young person, it's very difficult to be able to engage as a community and receive support for the work you're doing. So when we had to announce, we did a first grant cycle from for about $200,000, and our second grant cycle, we had a lot of learnings, and we knew that like even for me to register Enact, it was like it's not an easy task, and this is not something every other young person can do, or have a bank account and a lot of other things. So when we put out a call for the council itself, we said, if you don't have a registered organization and you're still a group of young people, you can apply for the grant. This is, I'm not speaking about $1,000, $2,000. We're speaking about $25,000 and $50,000 worth of grant. And we said, if you don't have a bank account, it's okay. Find a fiscal sponsor, you can still apply. If you don't know English, it's okay, as long as you know Spanish and French, because we targeted African and Latin American communities. You can still respond to the grant in your own language and still apply. So that is where you build on inclusion and what meaningful inclusion and youth empowerment means. If I continue to have like grant application in English, and then you expect people in Africa and Latin America to apply, they won't apply, because forget having the skills, they don't even know the language, right? So even if I have the best of skills of proposal writing, best of budgeting skills, there's also something like a language barrier. So they can't, the moment they try to go to chat gpt and translate their own language or come up with something, obviously a lot of funders are going to do it. And that's why I really appreciate when and how the council was formed. And it's called the participatory grant making approach, which means the funders just tell us this is the amount, and we make every single decision about the money. Every single, there is, they don't, they guide us, we consult them when we need to, but the final decision about the money is always made about us. So the second cycle, when we were successful in the first cycle, that was 200,000. They came back to us with $350,000 again, and that's how we did the second cycle, and gave more money. And I also see the impact. I was fortunate enough to meet some people at COP, like our grantees who were also there. And when we speak about addressing loss and damage, these are also places when we have given these grants, they're already impacted by an extreme weather event. That's how you address loss and damage, right? There is loss and damage already there. So there are people building toilets or building schools, or helping people rebuild their livelihoods, because if you can't grow as a farmer, if you've lost your land because of flooding, can you generate livelihood until the flood stops? There's, you must have alternative livelihoods. People are actually working on these, and we've been able to consider that. But if you left grant making to somebody in the global north with like millions of dollars of money, for them to be able to consider the ideas around bureaucracy or the reporting and everything else, that would have become a barrier. None of them would have ever given the support we gave to the communities that receive the money through the council now. So I think there is a lot of creative ways that we can engage with young people and empower them. And the thing, young people are already capable, we just need to recognize them and give a platform, instead of approaching with the idea that, oh, you don't know something, here I'll come teach you. You start off with, tell me what you know, let's build from there together. And that's how the best of the best youth engagement and empowerment happens.
Amazing. I think both of you have given quite a food for thought as to how to understand and approach youth engagement in the first place, which I think would be really useful for the attendees as well as the people who are going to catch up with the webinar from the recordings. So at this juncture, like since both of you have been working both on ground, like at the very ground level with the youth and different stakeholders, are also ardent advocates for multilateral collaborations and global climate policies. You people have engaged, uh, in global conference of youth as well as a conference of parties. Uh, on that note, like, what is your perspectives and takeaways and observations about the recently concluded COP29?
Thanks. I'm not going to repeat what you've already seen all over social media about the big or maybe small finance goal and at least 300 billion text and all of that. But being an adaptation person, mm, my takeaways, two, three takeaways, which I was following online. I was not at COP this year. But yes, I have been there. The last 3 years were really hectic, and we tried to navigate together and as individuals and following different negotiations. But yes, two, three takeaways which I had for this year were, of course, under adaptation, the global goals on adaptation and how the framework has been adopted. And there is somewhere the mention on the means of implementation. Although the civil society again is not that happy because means of implementation means finance and technology transfer and capacity building and all of that. And I think we have still a long way to go in terms of how that could be made possible. The indicators are there, um, but how can we measure progress? How can we make progress rather than we can measure some progress, of course, with the support which can be received as part of the adaptation finance and other instruments which have been developed over time. I was not very happy with the NAP assessment outcome. If you are aware of the national adaptation plans, there are about 50 odd national adaptation plans. The parties which have come up with their own plans mostly SIDS because they need to, they don't have any other option. And some developing countries are also kind of stepping in, developing their own national adaptation plans. And there was an assessment which had to be made, a decision around that. And um, although it didn't really come up because of the lack of consensus, and of course there were some political disagreements there, and it has now been postponed to the technical discussions have been postponed to the SBs in the 2025, and then later uh, the COP 13 Brazil. So yeah, the adaptation has been a really difficult negotiation topic because of course it's intangible. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of investment. It's more of more on the qualitative side. It's difficult to map. Mitigation is just equation, and it's easy to kind of calculate, make those all calculations and come up with a number. And that's why I think following adaptation for so many years, it has always been difficult to follow it from the first place. But also I know the stakeholders are really hesitant in coming up with upfront, say, indicators and really working on adaptation, especially because of the complexity it brings to the table and non-quantifiable nature of it. But I think we have a lot of experts around it, and I almost feel that why can't this happen with so many stakeholders together, with so many collaborations, as you already mentioned, as Hema already mentioned, happening at the global level. But yeah, it internationally, I think it has a long way to go, but there have been, in India at least, there have been focus around adaptation, and many other countries like in Africa, a lot of promotion of approaches around locally led adaptation. So it's not that it's not happening, but the push from the global level is still is still limited. And again, everything comes down to finance, and you already know how the finance negotiations happen. But yes, very excited for the COP 30 in Brazil, because from the UNICEF side, it's the advocacy is around having that COP for children, focusing on children and seeing especially because how their future is going to be compromised if the actions are not taken. So yeah, a lot of advocacy in the next year for UNICEF.
Okay. A long way to go is something that Srishti stressed on while answering this question to meet the targets. So Hema, your perspectives about the climate diplomacy that happened in COP and the outcomes of it.
Um, I try to follow and engage on loss and damage specifically across all thematics. So loss and damage features almost everywhere, and we advocate for it. One thing we try to advocate for. So last year, the loss and damage fund was operationalized at COP28, and
Yeah.
this year was like true operationalization happened at a press conference after a lot of commitments. Itself, but this the amount that has been committed till now is 731 million, which is nowhere close to the actual loss and damage figures that is estimated to be 937 billions of dollars. So 731 million is like probably giving repaying somebody 10 rupees for 1,000 rupees loan. um, but I think it also goes back to show, and obviously this builds on to the conversation around finance, and there's obviously how do you accept and move forward with the decision that is made. Yes, a civil society fought back, so did the global south, and I was very happy with the stand that India took, and how multilateral processes work in terms of consensus. And there's always, I think, my reflection since the last two COPs have also been around the power of the presidency itself, which has been overlooking procedures that have been established for many years. And you just do what it takes to finish the conference. I think that is also an approach that is now being taken up by the presidencies, because there have been failed in negotiations even after extended 2 weeks across UNFCCC, but now every presidency is like, if it extends by one day, let's forget all the rules of procedure. Let's do what it takes to have this decision out. I just feel like that's becoming a trend now with all presidencies. And obviously another thing that I do follow very on the other hand is also the gender negotiation. So there's the Lima work program on gender. So the work program has now been extended for another 10 years. But if you need to take gender action or youth action or whatever climate action, you need the money, and there's no money to do that. So I think this, and the fact that we also had to, I did have a bunch of bilaterals with European governments, and some global north countries. There was also this suggestion, sure, let's increase the climate funding, but then it's not going to be it's going to be funding from the developmental aid that is already being given. They're just going to rename it. So, but that's what the civil society does. There is a clear demand for new and additional funding that is required. We don't, yes, they're already supporting through developmental aid to a lot of global south countries, but that does that mean you change the name and give it a glamorous PR and then say, here I'm supporting climate justice initiatives? Or do you actually commit an additional amount from the beyond the already existing commitments you have for development? Because global south can't afford to choose between spending money on poverty or spending money addressing the climate crisis itself, right? So I think it's a very, I mean, COP is a political process. So you'll see a lot of politics happening, but there's always, I think civil society gives you hope. People who are always hopeful and willing to fight back and stand up for what's right. um, so yeah, I mean, it was a very sad cop, but I think I am looking forward to Brazil, and Brazil's leadership, to see how we can overcome the barriers that have been established this cop itself.
Okay. interesting reflections from this year's COP. And I like that how both of you are quite optimistic about the next COP, and you know, m- maybe that would spread more positivity as well. And that is what we need at this hour. Uh, so moving on to my next question, we touched upon the role which civil societies play, and how we engage with different stakeholders and navigate the politics, the differences, etc. So could you throw us some light around your engagement with different types of stakeholders, and the challenges that you generally face, and how you know overcome it?
So yeah, I think over the past so many years, of course, there have been a lot of interactions, a lot of collaborations, a lot of
Mhm.
conflicts also when it comes to the ideologies of how, say, I want to work, or I want to work as part of an organization, or we want to like my first project itself had about 19 partners. We had academicians, we had doctors from the municipal corporation, we had we had, of course, civil society who's working like on the grassroots level. We were that civil society who were taking lead from the grassroots level, having the presence in various some communities across India, and also some partnerships in Bangladesh and Nepal as well. So yeah, when we are working together and we want to make things happen, of course, there are a lot of negotiations and consensus happening at the back end, but we come up with definitely some common interest areas, and one foundation that they want, each one of us wants to create impact. The process of creating that impact could be a little different. For me, it could be seeing something which can change people's lives, like maybe impacting them to that level. From a research point of view, it could be how people can have more accessibility towards data. Um, for others, say for the community themselves, they will think of how they can learn more and say be a leader in their own community and contribute more towards the growth of the community, not only from a climate perspective, but say when they are facilitating basic services and all of that. So yes, I mean 19, 20 partners in my first project, coming all of them coming with a different perspective. We had fight around, when we were implementing a community-based surveillance system on how, sorry, not young people, but how the community leaders could understand why surveillance is required, why heat wave or heat stress is affecting them, why their house, which had a tin roof, is hotter than a house which had concrete or any other type of roof, and why they need to make investments in resilience, why they need to build resilience. So we had fights around what kind of surveillance systems need to be installed. And of course, when you are in a civil society organization, fundraising, finance, we have already talked at length about that. So while we are working in 100 plus some communities, you can't have the best surveillance systems, because the idea was to establish a culture of resilience among young people, not having the best kind of data, right? So this, of course, had a lot of conflicts, and we were able to explain the researchers in our team. So these kind of conflicts are common, but then we actually came up with the common interest, and we were able to establish that foundation that this is what we want. The effectiveness of the surveillance didn't matter at that time. This I'm talking about in 2015, 2016, where we just wanted the community to understand why they need to build resilient, why they are vulnerable, why they need to do certain surveillance, how they need to protect them. So for that, we didn't really want like the best world class surveillance system so that they can map their heat stress, but of course a fair idea of why they need to do it, why they need to have their roof system say white painted, so having that kind of ideas into their lives. So I remember the earlier quote which we had received from these researchers was like 40,000, and then when we had budgeted say some 6-7,000, and we were not really upfront about it, but then we said that we have 6-7,000. After all these discussions, I think we had a string of discussions, having this into place, and they were like, no, no, we can do it in 4,000 also. Imagine. That's what. So that was a huge win for us. Okay, we are able to put our foot forward and tell them why is it required, why we are doing it. We don't want the best data, and in India and in many other countries, we don't have slum level data as well. Even the temperature which is measured is generally measured through an instrument which is generally at the airports. And if you measure the real-time temperature at the airport and within a slum community within the city, the heat island effect comes into play. There are so many other factors. There's more pollution within the city. There's no green area. So the difference also we were able to map with those basic systems of 4,000, 4,500 rupees. So yeah, I mean, so all I want to say is, of course, it's very important to have different actors together in the room. We also learned a lot from them. It's not that as a civil society, we learned why the mosquito breeding should not happen, why it is why the temperature rise is kind of promoting more mosquito breeding. All of that we were able to understand and design our strategies like that with the community. So you need to have those actors in the room. You need to have these collaborations, but very importantly you need to have those common interests in place before you are having those collaborations. And also the focus should be how can we make it work once you have established the common interest, and once you have again sorted it, what needs to be done, who is accountable for doing things. That's really important. Otherwise you will just be talking like in different workshops people talk and there's nothing happening on the ground, and that we were really able to establish in our first project itself. um, yes, from in terms of private sector engagement, I have not had in my career journey, I have not had direct private sector engagement with my work directly. It has been limited to funding and providing certain solutions, directly funding the certain projects of the communities. But yeah, this current role within Yuva and UNICEF India, I have been engaging with a lot of private sector stakeholders also. And while again, there is a long way to go in terms of sustainability, and I don't want to touch upon that, but what we have been trying to push is how young people can be central to all their discussions, whether it is employee engagement, whether it is having panel discussions, ensuring that there is a young person who is represented. So those all things we are trying. That's also like baby steps we are taking. But yes, there is a lot of investment from the private sector that can come in. How can we leverage that and also make it work for the young people is what we are trying when we are engaging with the private sector. So I just wanted to uh, tell all the young people that I know private sector is always a little risky for all of us, but that's also we also need to ensure that most of the finance will come from the private sector. Even if you have seen reports, they're always being quoted, even in the UN spaces, even in the COP spaces, even by the parties themselves, they have been quoting that the private sector needs to come in, and they, of course, they can come in with a lot of financial support. So I just wanted to establish that again. I know it's difficult, but we'll have to make it work so that we get the required funding for our own work. But we also need them to understand why it will happen, how we can make it happen, and how it is for all our common interests. I know it is difficult. It has been very difficult for me also as a civil society person, but how can we make it work is what I have been focusing on in my current role with all the other stakeholders. So yeah, that would be my take on that.
Okay, so even if they are difficult, they have to be on the same page. Okay. Sounds like quite a challenging task. Over to you, Hema. Like you have touched upon like extensively on the inherent biases towards, certain sections and participatory justice as one of the goals for Enact. Uh, so how do you, while engaging with various stakeholders, uh, ensure that these objectives are met? Like, what are the challenges that you face, and how do you usually navigate around?
I think just building on Srishti is having a common purpose. It's the approach that you have being one of the stakeholders itself. The thing is, I've been a part of academia. I'm also a researcher. I've been like, on the side of policy. I've been on ground, and I've put on many hats. But the need there's always a need for conversation that is interdisciplinary in nature. And most of the stakeholders always are like, I'm going to stay in my lane. So this has a lot to do with, because that is gonna impact the kind of whatever you're trying to address or approach or come up with solutions for. Everything changes with the approach every stakeholder is coming to the project. If you have, there are these amazing scientists who come up with incredible data specific reports that can actually guide better policies. We have something called evidence based policy making. You build policies based on data and experiences of people, your policies are better, exponentially better. But we don't have scientists and policymakers talking as often as there should be, right? I mean, even when it comes to like the ground level work, internationally we always say UNFCCC is guided by the IPCC and whatnot. Everybody is doing so much internationally. But if you have like a district disaster management plan, how many scientists are actually involved in formulation of that plan? Or, is the plan even informed based on science? Is social science research conducted for the communities? Because you're developing a management plan for the people, right? Are communities consulted? Are they given an opportunity? You always have these set of people who know absolutely nothing about ground realities, but they say we consult and engage for the sake of doing that, and then come up with solutions that are not necessarily comprehensive. So that's where I feel, even as stakeholders, the biggest way to look at the right kind of outcomes is to look at it and approach it considering interdisciplinarity of the issue itself. The moment you say climate change is a science issue or a policy issue or a this issue, you're taking away the meaning of what it truly is, right? You're just siloing it to be something. This is how climate change started, right? Our conversations around climate change was simply like, oh, climate change is an environmental issue. Ice caps are melting on the mountains. Sea level is rising in the coastal areas. So, say a person who lives in Bangalore, climate change does not impact me. The narrative changed because that was what was built. You look at it as an environmental issue. So I think that the moment you say interdisciplinarity, climate change impacts your mental health, climate change impacts stock markets, climate change impacts your livelihood or your job or the way, people in the think about Winter Olympics. There's an entire industry working on it. You fail to have snow at a certain point of time that is supposed to help the Winter Olympics happen. You're literally depriving livelihood of millions of people who are involved in making that Olympics happen. But the conversation now is building to that interdisciplinary nature of the impacts of the climate crisis itself. Earlier, everybody would be like, why should I care about climate change? I am a sport. This is where people look at. So they look at like this things that are absolutely connected, but the narrative that is built is they have no relation whatsoever. So why should I be speaking about climate change? An Olympic, a person who is like a gold medalist in Winter Olympics, it's a matter of her livelihood. She should care about climate change if Winter Olympics stop happening, right? So I think that's where we need to start thinking what and how, and the having more openness as a stakeholder to say that, yes, I have a perspective, but it's like you have one thing from this side, my view is only towards this side, there can be somebody else looking at something really different, right? So we also need to go to the other side to be able to see this perspective, and that openness is required of any stakeholder when they're trying to engage. The moment they do that, I think when we come up with solutions, they tend to be more comprehensive and more realistic in nature, because we always speak about how policies are great on paper and never implementable. This is simply because of it. Policymakers don't know the ground realities to make better policies. But if they base their policies on lived experiences and evidence and people who are actually going to be the beneficiaries of that policy, then I think, I mean, generally, the kind of work we're doing, we'll always do a better job.
Okay. I love both of your answer for this question because uh, I like how you approach the question and give us new perspectives about understanding the fundamentals actually. Uh, Thank you very much. But since we are nearing the end of the webinar, my last question to both of you would be your vision. What is your vision? I know like there is a shared aspiration to ensure that we protect our planet, our people, and everything. But what exactly do you envision to achieve in the upcoming days? And yeah.
Um, so two, three things which I have thought of, like not only as my is as in my professional life, but also personally, what I would like to do is keep doing a few things which I do. First is like how I can support communities, people around me, people, young people, of course. There are many young leaders I have been in touch with, helping them, supporting them in whatever I can in my personal capacity or in professional capacity. How can I help them amplify their voices? Um, in whatever spaces I go, if there is no youth representation, but how can I make that happen through my, dialogue or through my intervention? How can I make that happen? If somebody else from my team is going, how can they be a champion of, of young people? So trying to make that happen, and especially around grassroots leadership, how the communities are getting impacted, people who had, as him also mentioned, lived experience, getting those, you know, if they are not represented directly, how their voices could be represented is my focus. So that's what I would always advocate for, and how these grassroots communities, can be mainstream. Their voices could be mainstreamed. Of course, they need to be there to speak for themselves, but if they're not there, how people from the who have worked in the grassroots communities, who have direct contact with them, have worked with them, for them, could be part of those spaces, would be definitely the one thing. Second is there's a lot of capacity still need to be built. I know that we are doing education, we are doing awareness, we are doing different skilling programs, but I feel there's still a lot of capacity building work which needs to be done. I keep doing as part of UNICEF, sometimes outside of UNICEF as well, where I train local government stakeholders who don't have an idea about what is climate change, how they can, their targets could be affected by climate change, how there is an intersectional issues, the climate change is having, who is impacting, why women are getting impacted more, why young people need to be part of, the solution and all of that. So I keep that. I know there is a lot of scope there, and we need to build, keep building capacities. But these are the two things I want to keep doing. But third thing, which I feel like needs to happen, and I don't know where to, I mean, I have already started in some way, but I also feel how can we have more investments towards developing countries or SIDS countries? How can we drive those investments? Maybe not only through the multilateral spaces or relying only on the COP decisions. Of course, they are major decisions and they're going to impact the entire world, but how can we have that? There are many investments on adaptation through, bilateral agreements, and there are many organizations, philanthropies, who are, say, driving adaptation. And the project which I worked on came in 2015. It was funded by Rockefeller. You said, like 10 years ago, they had started thinking about resilience. So I'm sure there are some champions of resilience, and they are ready to fund these kind of projects. So how can I drive, as a person, I can drive investments to Asia, to more developing countries, to these countries, is what my vision is. And I just wanted to end with, like, we can do the best we can and contribute to the solution. We should not be taking all the pressure of the world on how, we should not be taking on too much on ourselves, we can contribute in the best way we can, and that's what I want to do in my maybe next 5 or 10 years of my work.
I'm pretty sure that Srishti always delivers. So I'm more excited to see how you do it. So up to you, Hema. Your vision and
Um, honestly, that's still in the formative stages, I believe, but it's more like, doing the kind of work where, say, I work with farmers, and, like, there's that one farmer whose livelihood is saved after an event or because of climate change when it could have gone wrong. You build resilience of that one farmer in real life. Changing or impacting anybody's life in a way that, this is what this it could have been worse, but it's there. Whatever happened for the better with my intervention. I think that's the kind of uh, goal I have. Or, like, say, you work with communities in the coastal region, a cyclone happens, but they survive. It is because of the work you do, um, which they might not have necessarily survived if not for the intervention. So I think I just want to do small things where you just help. I think it goes back to, because maybe I continue to focus on, the basic rights or whatever. If somebody is able to eat 3 meals a day because of the work I do, I think that is an achievement for me, itself. Then obviously, the impact will amplify in itself. Another thing I want to do is, wherever I work, I want to build community resilience. Say I look at, like, lake rejuvenation projects that I've consulted for, even in Bangalore and stuff. A lot of people always want to spend like crores of money and get consultants to invest. You bring in the community that lives around the lake, they will help the lake survive. You won't even need money. They'll volunteer for you for free. And then across generations, people will take care of the lake because they feel it's part of their community itself. So think those little things in terms of making shift in how the society functions, even if it's for a small set of people. I think that's the kind of work I want to do in the next 5 to 6 or 10 years, whatever. I mean, I want to continue doing, but primarily such work. So that's me.
lovely, lovely. I expected, some great schemes and everything, but I loved how both of you stressed on local action, small steps, small changes, uh, which is amazing. And that goes on to show that, you know, uh, you where you try to focus majorly. That's amazing. So, with that, thank you very much on behalf of IUC and WCL for participating in this webinar and sharing amazing perspectives. Uh, and we would definitely uh, be once again maybe inviting you to share your expertise in specific fields. Feel free to accept our invite. And once again, thank you very much. Thank you to Roberto as well and to all the attendees who had participated. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ishwarya.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Thank you, Hema.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.